Welcome to Nuditea, where we get nude with our feelings and we drink tea. I'm Kimberly.
And I'm Wendy. And in this podcast, we cover a pretty wide range of topics. We talk about food, sex, adult shit. Sometimes we have special guests. So,
Hope you enjoy.
okay. What tea are you drinking?
I'm just drinking super ginger because I figure that you're going to pass along your cold to me. So maybe the power of ginger can protect
Compels us.
me. Yes.
Well, I am trying to quarantine myself. I still don't know what this is, because I did get the flu shot. So I feel like maybe my flu is just not as bad as it could be, but it feels like either a very gentle flu or a really shit cold.
Right.
So I feel like I'm gonna say yes, the flu shot was excellent. It worked. I feel great for having the flu.
That's true.
But I am drinking David's Tea's Cold 911. It's pepperminty. It's quite nice. Mm-hmm. There's a suspicious chamomile flavor in here, though.
Not a fan.
I'll deal with it because the peppermint kind of overmasks it, so it's not that bad. Okay, topic for today.
So topic for today is sex talks. When we got them, if we got them, where we learned our sex information from, if it wasn't from our parents, that kind of thing. So did you want to start with, like, what do you remember about your sex talk?
I thought about this last night, and I actually have no memory of my mother giving me a sex talk. And the only actual talking that I remember with my parents was before I left for university. My dad had sat me down. I don't know where my mom was. I don't know why she wasn't the one giving me this talk or why she didn't feel the need to be present. But he had made some sort of analogy that was very Chinese. It was like...
Please tell me what that was.
Have I not told you before?
I don't think so.
It was like, you know, once you go out into the real world, you are like a lotus flower, and there's going to be a lot of people around you who are like the mud that lotus flowers grow in, and they're going to try and dirty you and cling onto you, but remember that you are a lotus flower and you must come out clean and rise through this mud and bloom in a glorious way. Maybe, okay, so like, not those exact words, but he definitely used the analogy of like a lotus flower coming through some mud.
That, like, literally, I don't associate that with, like, oh, that's definitely the sex talk. That could just be like, there are people who get you down, but you are...
Yeah, but the way he sat me down...
You knew it was more serious.
I knew it was the birds and the bees talk. But it's weird. I literally just realized that my mom never, ever talked to me about it. However, she did borrow a book from the library for me. The book was hilarious. I had many sleepovers with my friends in which we just pored over the book and died because I just remember there was one story where, I think it was one of the first stories where this little boy in the book was just walking down the hallway after going to the bathroom at night, and then he hears strange sounds coming from his parents' bedroom, and he doesn't know what they are. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember what the conclusion of the story is, but it was something like, and these are the sounds that your parents make when they're having sex because they love each other. And I feel like my mom did a fairly good job if she didn't want to broach the topic with me. Yeah. That she actually got me a book that, like, had the word sex in it and, like, told me what was going on.
She just didn't want to use her own words or wasn't comfortable maybe with it.
And she probably would have had this talk with me in Chinese, and, like, how much would I have absorbed of that in Chinese if I was in elementary school?
True. Because did you not primarily speak Chinese?
No, but I think because Chinese people, when we're talking about more vulgar subjects, we tend to use a lot of, like, metaphors and analogies and similes anyway.
Just talk around the actual...
just quietly tiptoe around the words like penis, vagina, like penetrative sex.
Which is not unlike, most families, honestly.
That's true, and they want to be able to protect their children. Protect their children. I just almost spilled my tea, if you didn't see. But in Chinese, I think it was just, I guess, too awkward for my mom to even try. Mm-hmm. Oh, here's the thing. She never got the sex talk. My parents never got the sex talk, so that might play into why. Mm-hmm. And so they already technically one-upped my grandparents by giving me a book and talking about lotus flowers and mud. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what about you?
Me. So I am of a family of 6 kids. Mm-hmm. I honestly don't remember any kind of sex talk. I also don't remember any kind of, period talk with my mother. And I don't know if I just don't remember it. Mm-hmm. That's obviously a possibility. But I think I would. Usually kids remember, that first time they learn.
The awkwardness.
Yes. Yeah. And so I think either she forgot or I didn't blatantly ask her about it.
She was dealing with a lot of children, a lot of things.
And I don't think my father would ever have been comfortable. I don't know if he gave my brothers the sex talk or if mom just did us all. Mm-hmm. Well, most of us anyway, because I don't remember it. But apparently, my older sister, who's 4 years older than me, mom actually sat her down with a book and was talked her all through it. So it's not like she just never broached the topic. So I don't know if she thought that my siblings would just handle my questions or I would just learn it.
Okay, knowing your mother, now that I think about it, I feel like maybe she meant to do it personally with you, but she just got all the siblings confused. There's too many of you. Do you all look the same? So she probably just accidentally missed you. And then she might have realized later on, it was Kim doesn't need this at this age. She knows.
So, and, the only sex talks I've ever gotten are from the education system. Okay. So.
And how did you find the education system for sex ed?
I found it pretty good. I think I got a decent schooling in it. I remember just for even puberty and your period and what you're going to go through, and even briefly, because they split us up into different genders. Yes. And so the girls were taught by this female teacher, and grade 6 for periods. They didn't really talk about sex at that time, but. And just what you're going to go through, all that new hair, all this stuff. And then they briefly talked about guys are also going through their own thing. Mm-hmm. But obviously the guys got more in-depth talk with a male teacher. And because I remember when I first got my period, it took me a little bit to be oh, I'm on my period.
Oh, this is what it is.
Yes, exactly. So, but again, mother never kind of told me anything about
That's
it.
That's kind of crazy because I guess also maybe again it's the fact that you had siblings, so maybe your older siblings had things like pads and tampons and these things just around the house anyway, so that you could be I need one, and they'd be oh yeah, you got your period here. So maybe that's strange though, because I know when I first got my period, I also freaked out because I didn't know what the heck it was. My mom was on the phone. She was I'm busy right now, talk to me later. And I was no, I'm dying, I'm bleeding. And she's oh, she hung up the phone.
It's such a scary thing for
I thought I was dying, and it was the first time I remember it was my underwear was stained, it was dark and crusty, and I was just oh my god, I have a disease. Mm-hmm. My parents are going to disown me. It's this is what happens when you don't talk to your kids about their periods before they get them, because then when it happens, they have a moment of trauma where they think they're gonna die. But afterwards, then she went through and was oh, this is the process of becoming a woman. That's about it, though. She didn't tell me that this was kind of the background biology that's essential to having a child, and it was your, the lining of your uterus shedding off. She didn't give me any of that because I'm not even really sure that she knew or knows to this day. Yeah, but my school, I don't want to blame them directly, But they sure skipped over my grade for sex ed. I remember the grade above me, because we were in French immersion, so a lot of our classes were clumped together. I remember the older kids, so like grade 8s, I think, in one of the gym classes, we kind of just like screwed around in one corner, and then our teacher at that time, she took them and sat down in a ring. It was very dramatic. In the center of the gym, told us that no one, under any circumstances, was allowed to approach the ring within like 5 feet or something. And that was their like sex education. That was their sex talk.
Okay.
Of course, we all tried to like throw dodgeballs in that direction. I was like, oops, had to come get my ball. What are you talking about? I didn't really hear anything, but that never happened with us. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how they skipped over us. And then, so that was in elementary school. In high school, I went to a Catholic high school.
Yeah.
Our sex ed was in our religion class. We did a project on STIs, talking about how if you have sex, you will catch an STI, your genitals will look awful, like and you will die. Yeah, it was like, the more gory your pictures were on your poster, the better the grade.
You gotta love that fear-based.
Oh yeah, fear-based teaching system. It's wonderful, isn't it? And I do vaguely remember like another sort of sex ed class associated with our gym's class, but that was kind of very vague to me. I have no strong memories of that. It was just kind of like, this is what the human body looks like. These are what girls have. These are what boys have. There was actually no sex involved in that sex ed class. So that was the extent of young childhood education on these matters.
Well, I think so going into like grade 9, you have that in gym class, you have that week of like health class where they're really like delving into, this is like pictures of like anatomical pictures of the female, the male, and they do talk about it. I think I remember pretty well. Maybe I'm giving them more credit than maybe I learned a lot of it just kind of by like asking people or just kind of picking things up by like what other people were saying.
It's a strange system. I would be surprised if you had a lot of questions.
I will say it was, you know, they were really good at teaching like all different forms of contraceptive. They taught you about like STDs, STIs pretty well. And even if you took a second year of gym, which I love gym, so I took them all throughout high school. They had like another week, but it was more because they had split them up, I think, because it's female males gym classes. The second one we like learned heavily about like women's pregnancies and like, or even like all the hormones that are going into your period and why this is all happening. So I think the education system has a lot to like attribute to what my knowledge was instead of me like, being blind. And
that's what it's supposed to do.
I remember my grade 9 gym teacher. She was the best, but she was like, "What is this?" And everyone's all embarrassed to say, but it was the penis. So I was like, the penis, and people laughed. And then she's like, no, everyone has to say penis without laughing. And then there was also the sheet she gave us, and she was all like, mark down any of these terms you don't understand. And then she would go through and be all effective. Like, oh, pop your cherries this. Like, so that was really good. And I think that was like, obviously not something in the curriculum. They're like, you need to cover this. I think she just took it upon herself being like, obviously there's a lot of slang or a lot of like,
how do we make this fun, informative, so that everyone's comfortable? That's really, she was the bomb.
Yeah, so you're not like having to raise your hand being like, I haven't heard what this is. And then obviously everyone will be like, you know what this is? Even though nobody knows what it is. It's just like, she's just looking on the sheets like, oh, everyone's like kind of wondering this, or I'll talk about this. And so that was really, really helpful. But again, you just kind of pick things up, and then obviously with the internet, you can just search all the random terms.
That's true. I think I did end up doing a lot of Google searching. Thank goodness my parents back in the day, I don't think they knew like what it meant to search through internet history. So I had a lot of internet freedom, simply because my parents didn't know. But I just realized, did your parents, because you grew up in a Christian household, did your parents ever broach the topic of virginity with you and what that meant? I guess if they didn't have the talk with you, they didn't. But what are your...
See, this is where, like, do I forget if we had to talk? I think it's one of those things, well, if you go to church every single Sunday, you get this idea. See, it was definitely like, we believe having sex before marriage is a sin. Like,
Yep.
they would say that, and even, I don't know at what age they kind of started being all like, definitely being like, that's a sin, and that could have been out throughout my whole life. And so maybe I had like a one sentence, like, this is what sex is, and this is what you shouldn't do. But I think through just like preachings, like that kind of thing, you get a sense of probably what they're talking about. And so I don't know when it was all like, there was never a eureka moment where I'm all like, oh, this is what this is and this is what they're talking about. I think it was just a very subtle, like, oh, and then this is a piece for this, like, you know, it all.
This is the piece for this.
So, yeah, I don't.
And do you think because your family was so Christian, did that affect the way that they talked to your siblings / didn't talk to you?
I'd imagine so. There's probably like a very heavy, this is something you do with your husband. Like, that's probably something that's very
true.
Stressed upon, that kind of thing. And I'm even wondering, because I even think like nowadays it's not like I can have super open communication with my mother like about sex, but whether that's like because I'm like, she'll feel uncomfortable and I'm not asking the questions. My mother is very good at like having conversations with her children and just hearing our opinions, and then she'll give hers back. She's very receptive to that. She's a really good person to talk to. So I don't want to like drag her through the mud here, but and so I'm just wondering, like, nowadays, like, is it more if we're having sex before marriage, does she not want to kind of play ignorance to it, so she doesn't actually have to know, and that's why we don't talk about it,
pretending like it's not happening, even though she knows it is, doesn't want to discuss it. She's like, my kids may be living in sin, but if I don't know about it, maybe I can save them.
Maybe, and I don't know if it's that extreme, but and I'm also just wondering, there's this idea that we have the sex talk once. Well, I think like sex talk should probably be like, you judge by their age, what can they handle, and then maybe revisit it a little bit later and maybe get more anatomical or more graphic, or just like being able to get past the point of all like the birds and the bees are using analogies so a child understands. And so I think it would be good if it was continued to be revisited, and like I just don't feel like, one, it was never told to me to begin with, and to talk about it. And I think my mother would probably talk about it, honestly. I'm not thinking she'd be like, we're not going to talk about this, but I think because of their Christian upbringing, it's very seen as like a taboo thing probably to talk about with your kids, like, before.
Do you think it was also, I'm assuming, do you think maybe your mother also got a like very toned down version of sex talk, or do you think she just didn't get one? I think
even if you just take the Christianity aspect out of it, I think generations back, like, there's a certain point where like people don't talk about it, but I do think she probably got like either a toned down one, or just it was a very like, this is what sex is, and then like, don't do it, like, you know,
don't do it until
wait or something.
Yeah, you get married.
So I am interested in kind of knowing what her background for sex talk is, but and then
the taboo, the taboo thing is super relevant to my family's, actually all of Chinese society's background in terms of talking about sex. The Mao era was a period of desexualization. So not only was sex taboo, it was also, they took extra steps to ensure that sexuality was kind of like stripped from society. So men and women wore basically the same cut of clothing. It was like a very Mao era, like boxy, long sleeved, and then like these straight like trousers. There was no.
They didn't know they were being like gender neutral at the time, but
they were ahead of their time. No, they were also behind. They were going back. Women had to like have certain haircuts. They couldn't have long hair because that was deemed promiscuous and too attractive. And it was heavily stressed that sex was something you did once you got married. You had to endure it because it was an act of duty to
your
make
country.
children, and that was it. Like, once you've popped out the appropriate number of children, you just you leave sex alone. So I think my parents grew up in that era. My grandparents never, ever, ever gave them the sex talk, to the point where it was so taboo that my parents did not know physically how to have sex on their wedding night. So they tried, and they didn't understand, something wasn't working, and after a while of not being able to get pregnant, my parents actually visited the doctor, and the doctor was like, "Oh, you're still a virgin, and the doctor had to teach my parents what to do to be able to have real penetrative sex that could lead to children, because they just didn't know, which is awful because that's kind of, it's embarrassing for us to think about, but in their phase of growing up into adults, I think that was pretty common, because people didn't talk about it. It was something that you didn't want to talk about, because it seemed like it was a dirty topic. But I think that also changed their way of thinking so that they could try and help me a little bit. I remember, not specifically with sex, but my mom was more open about, when I first tried using tampons, she was very down to Google things, and we had discovered, the hymen is called the hymen, and what that means, and then we were, talking about virginity, because I was like, oh, that's, the hymen is what they refer to, if it's unbroken, then you're a virgin. So I think it's important to realize, I'm also not going to drag my parents through the mud, because it's a very cultural, societal-based thing to be able to talk about sex openly. And your family's religious background and my family's cultural background did not allow for that. So I think it would have been really hard for them to even fathom how.
Yeah. And so that's really great that, your mother's like, I have to kind of learn things as my daughter's learning things.
Yeah, we went on a Wikipedia deep dive when I was trying to use the tampon, because she was concerned that it would break my hymen and then I wouldn't be a virgin anymore. But it was like, calm down, no, it's fine. Yeah, it's fine. So, quick tea sip.
Yeah.
To soothe my throat. But I know some people in our generation have had really pretty in-depth sex talks with their parents. So maybe we should talk to some of our friends. Also talk to your sister who did get a sex talk, and see how that went. What information was given and what was not provided.
Yeah, for sure. Because it is an interesting thing. Maybe it's just sex is just a weird thing, I think, for any parent to kind of talk to. And it's this idea of how much information do you give them? Does this information improve their idea around sex? Is it a healthy conversation, or is it a very much shame, don't do it? Yeah. It's for women, it's it's gonna hurt and you just have to deal with it kind of deal. And it's still just a very taboo thing to talk about, which is still kind of annoying, but I think that's slowly
I think we're definitely on the same page, where we think that open communication leads to safer sex practices. So I think that's important. We always make this joke that we're going to educate the heck out of my kids, because you don't want any kids.
Yes, I'll take the nieces, nephews, your children. But.
Yeah, it's really important. And I think just now when you said we don't want the talks to be associated with shame and sin, I had a conversation that I told you about with my mom one Christmas ago. Yeah, last Christmas, my mom gave me a sex talk.
It was too much copyright.
True. So my mom last Christmas sat me down, and very seriously she was like, Wendy, can I just talk to you as a friend and not as a mom for a second. And I was already sweating. This is not going to end well.
Instant sweat, yeah.
Instant sweat pouring. And I was like, oh, okay. And I kind of knew that it was going to be about sex because, like, in what other situation would your parent be like, I just need to talk to you as a friend?
If they were having divorce, that would be the other. Oh,
shoot. Yeah, no, it wasn't that.
Yeah.
That would have been a real shocker. But basically, the first question she asked was, so have you and your partner done it? And she knows who my partner is, obviously. I'm just not going to say his name here. Yeah. But she was like, have you guys done it? And I was like, yes. Because I'm trying this thing. I've been trying this thing after undergrad where I try to be very honest with my parents despite what I think their reactions are going to be. So I wasn't going to lie to her and tell her that I wasn't having sex. So I told her, yes, we are. And she flipped a 180 on me and was like,
good.
Are you both enjoying it? Because that's very important. And more sweat pouring because I just never expected this kind of information or this kind of question from my mother. And she went on to talk about her and my dad's background with sex and how they really struggled with it in the beginning, and because they were never taught what sex was or what sex could be, which I think is really important. I don't think they ever really learned to enjoy it, but my mom and I are very similar because we both really crave like that physical attachment and physical comfort. So she always felt like there was something lacking. Like, my parents love each other, but because I think they were deprived of that sexual education, they never... I think their marriage could be a lot happier and a lot more fulfilled if they had learned properly how to express themselves through the acts of love and to be able to enjoy sex, not just use sex as a tool to make children. Yeah. Which I think my mom... I'm really proud of her for broaching the subject with me to begin with, but for her to actually, first of all, be okay that we were having premarital sex, because at that point we were not engaged. So it was like extra scandal. And also to want us to make sure that we were sexually compatible before things got super serious, I think is a really important thing.
It's an impressive step, for sure.
Yeah, especially coming from such a conservative background where everyone wore the same puke-colored, like, box rectangle clothing for, like, decades and decades. Like, I think it's a really progressive step for her. And I think my dad is, in general, very progressive. And I think he knows that we're having sex. He just has chosen to pretend like it's not happening, which is, I think, a very acceptable dad thing to do. And he just assumes that I'm not an idiot, and then we're using protection, and then we're not pregnant.
Yeah. He trusts you.
Although the day I called them to tell them that I got a tattoo, I was like, okay, it's a big, serious deal. Please don't be mad. And he was like, are you dropping out of school because you're... And I was like, no! And I shouldn't have cut him off because I wish I knew, like, what he was going to say.
What the other thing was...
Yeah, I wonder if he thought I was pregnant.
That does sound like it was leading to that, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a couple things that I take from, like, your mom approaching you. Is one, it's really brave for her to... Parents don't really like to tell their kids something that might not be working between
they hate talking about their failures
or their partner. And so that's really, I think, cool to hear that your mom's like, okay, so this is what's going to happen between your father and I. We love each other with this. Another one is talking about sex feeling good. Because I think a lot of the time, the first talk, again, this is why I think multiple talks is good. Because first talk, you just want to get them through, like, hey, this is the act of sex. This is what it kind of does. You procreate and stuff like that, but then to broach it again and be like, the pleasure you get from sex.
It can be pleasurable.
And I think for men, it's like an instant, obviously, because it's just a little easier to get there.
Yes.
well, with women, like, talking to, like a woman and being like, hey, so sex can be pleasurable, I think is...
Yeah, and the first time probably won't be. We're complicated
maybe,
creatures.
like, to figure out what you like, maybe by yourself, again, because, like, masturbation is a very taboo thing, almost more so than I think a sex talk.
Yeah, my parents have never talked to me about masturbation, and I don't even think they know that it's an option.
See, I feel like it's more intuitive for guys because it's like right there.
But for girls, it's like, what the hell do you do?
We're able to like hide our attraction pretty well, so we're like, it'll go away.
Yeah.
So, and I also think like the knowledge of sex and everything goes around it. Like I think there's a really strong connection with if you have really good sex talks. What sex is, I think a really healthy talk about consent goes along with that. Because if you're telling them like, hey, it can be pleasurable, but and this is what sex is, but realize that while it might feel like it, I think it's a really good segue to talk about consent in a very healthy manner. But
which is really important, and I think when we talk about educating my future children on sex, we're going to do some, like, heavy lesson planning. We're going to have the full thing. We're going to have PowerPoint slides. We're going to have, like, fun doodle sheets. They're going to be able to, like, you know, ask us anything. I want to be able for my children to be comfortable coming to me and asking me if they have any questions around it. I don't want to feel like the way, I guess, we kind of did where, again, not to drag our parents through mud because it's not really their fault, how we didn't feel like we could just go to our parents and be like, oh, what is it like when the penis goes into the vagina? Or like, what does semen look like? Like, what is it for? Like, those kind of like more touchy, in-depth questions I want my children to be able to ask me.
I feel like they can freely at any time.
Yeah,
really. Yeah.
And just no like judgment off the table, because I'm sure that if I had asked my parents a question like that when I was going through puberty, I think they would have been horrified. I think they would have probably sat me down and been like, you can't be, like, getting into this right now. You're too young. Sex is something you do after marriage. Like, you can't talk about this right now. I think that would have been their reaction at that point. Obviously, it's changed now. But I don't want that with my kids. I don't want there to be shame associated with asking questions. And it doesn't have to be a super formal thing. I just want them to be able to ask freely. But things like consent, things like methods of protection, things like birth control, IUDs, diva cups, these are all things that it's like information that might be hard for them to accumulate on their own, and it might take them a long time to understand, and that might not be able to cover the time when they start being sexually active. So I think it's important for parents or soon-to-be future parents to realize and set up just mentally a structure for how they want to be able to educate their children. And by that point, I would hope that the curriculum is also quite good so that maybe we don't have to do the bulk of the work. Maybe we're just filling in these extra curiosity-based questions.
Yes, which, I mean, we've had frustration with the whole Doug Ford. It is bad, right?
The government
kind of bringing back the curriculum to what
that
was
didn't
it, 19?
Go through, right?
Oh, it did.
Yeah,
I don't
it was
know.
like
I wasn't keeping up,
they tried to go back to like the late 1980s or something.
I'm surprised that sometimes this like outcry or this resistance to teaching of sex and like just your puberty in schools, because while someone who I think learned the majority of it from, and I'm like super helpful, and I don't know where I would have been, and I think without it, maybe I would have been like asked my parents, but I don't know what kind of talk I would have gotten. And I'm like, this is a talk where they don't have any, I guess, skin in the game, where it's like they're not their kids, they're not emotionally attached. As a teacher, for a certain extent, I mean, teachers are nice, and so they're able to just give it to you technically, and then maybe if you need more information, they're willing to talk about it. And so I think trying to bring the curriculum back and being like, because I think there's this idea that if we teach kids about sex, they're going to do it. But I think it's kids, if you teach them about it and you teach them right, they're going to do it. They're going to do it regardless, and so they'll do it in a safe way.
Yeah.
They'll do it in a way that they feel comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think having this, like, relying on the parents to do it because they might not do it maybe at the right age.
Mm-hmm. They don't have a set out curriculum the way we're planning to have with my children. So it might be hard for a parent to be able to cover all aspects. And I think another important thing when we're talking about the government and trying to bring back the old curriculum is the fact that the old curriculums don't address the issues of non-binary
which they want to
humans
pretend
just don't exist.
Doesn't exist. Or
they don't address
choose.
Homosexuality. They don't address bisexuality. There's nothing discussed about the LGBTQ community. There's no talk about how to be a good ally. So it just creates this environment where sex is hetero. Sex is penetrative. You have a penis going to a vagina. That is sex. And it's acceptable because there's two genders and this is just how it happened, which is very limiting. Yeah. It's so limiting because that's the age where kids are starting to realize, and maybe even before that, they start to realize that, oh, maybe I don't feel like I can identify with one gender or the other. Maybe
but there's nothing else kind of deal.
Yeah, but like, who's gonna tell them like, oh, you don't have to. You don't have to be a male or a female. You don't have to be one or the other. It can be whatever you want, basically. And the fact that people need to respect whatever you decide you can identify with.
Yeah, that falls with, like, also the parents, right? If they're not willing to accept that, or they see, like, so even if you do teach it in, I think, the education system, and a kid comes back and, like, I learned this, like, parents, that's where they're all like, I can't believe they taught you this. They've given you this option, and you've taken it.
But again, that's because that generation of parents, they didn't receive that education where they were like, oh, it's somehow like contagious, it's transmissible. The idea is like a spore and it goes around and makes all our children gay. Like they don't understand that that's not what happens. And they're like, oh, because the education system now includes all this stuff. Now we're seeing like a huge increase in the number of gay people. It's like, well, they were always a part of the LGBTQ community. It's just that we're more tolerant of it now. So they're less afraid to be open and to reveal their true gender identities, reveal their sexual preferences. It's a lot more accepting and a much more warm environment for everyone to be in. And I think parents, they're very concerned about their children not being binary or being heterosexual, which obviously once you become an auntie and I become a parent, I think I'm really hoping that we'll do a much better job and that parents similar age to us will be able to be a lot more accepting for their children, to be able to field these questions if they come up. And that takes educating ourselves as well. Like, I feel like we're still accumulating more information. Yeah, so I have a friend who does sex research, and she obviously then has her circle of friends who are non-binary or trans, and she speaks a lot on social media about how these people have been hurt by people who don't respect their identities. So it's very harmful for a child to A, not get the education that they should be getting, and B, then being trapped by the lack of education and the psychological trauma that it leads to, feeling like you're just something that you shouldn't be, or you feel like you're something, you're kind of stuck in a state that you don't like. Yeah, so that's really important.
So we don't get too far off topic. It is a connecting thing. I think, is there anything else you want to talk about like sex talks? And
just have them.
Just have them. And
we
have
didn't.
Of them.
We didn't really have them, but I think take home points. We want to have sex talks with our nieces, nephews, my children. And I think it's important for us to see that we need multiple sex talks through their development.
Not one and done, yeah.
Yeah, it's not something that can be explained through a one-off session. Okay, cool.
Okay, that's it for this episode.
Cool.
We'll see you for another.
Yeah.
Bye.